Hey everybody, it's LavenderTowne. And recently I did a video on my biggest character design pet peeves, and I realized that I could have a whole separate video for anime because anime has a totally different sort of design language and falls into different tropes than we see here in the West. So to start this off, I have to hit my biggest pet peeve, even though this is one that's so obvious and so pervasive, it's probably like totally goes without saying, but the carbon copy protagonist boy. Now, tropes and character design similarities will show up in every type of media, especially if something gets popular, but there is a level of copying each other's homework that's going on in anime studios that's actually way too far, I think, and it comes in the form of this super bland, flavorless protagonist. In a lot of anime, they will show on like their cover their designs of their like cool female characters, and then right in the middle of the first episode, you'll suddenly discover that the actual protagonist of the show is this incredibly boring high school boy. Usually they have like black or like a bluish black hair, and they have one tendril coming off of their head, but otherwise there's literally like nothing noticeable about them. I get that they're probably supposed to stand in for the the person watching, so he's supposed to just be the most like generic Japanese boy possible, but it's usually even worse than that, because even though they're sort of established as the most like average sort of person, and usually a good person by the end of it at least, the whole anime, most of the time when you see these guys, they'll be like totally like objectifying and treating their female friends like really badly, and just being kind of like a weird pervy opportunist the entire time. So that's a whole writing issue, but generally I just think this design needs to be retired. Like I can't watch another anime with one of these guys as the lead. It's just it's too painful. I've seen too many anime with leads who I actually like want good stuff to happen for them, and I actually like remember their names, and like they have defining characteristics, and like this guy is not it. Like somehow they end up bland even when they get isekai'd to another world. They still have the same like completely boring energy, and I think it needs to stop. We need to have main characters who are different, who have their own sort of spirit to them. They have to actually be characters. The first one was sort of a crime against like narrative and things being exciting, but this one is just a crime. This is the trope where there'll be a character who looks just like a little kid, almost always a little girl, and they'll be secretly like a 1,000-year-old demon lord or something like that. I find the tendency to make really cutesy little girl characters and then have them act like adults because they're some sort of like fantasy creature to be pretty creepy. I just like I could see how that could be really interesting narratively, but I find that when it hits, you know, the fandom of these animes and stuff, I find that it's often used as an excuse for people to like be creepy to these characters who look like little kids, just because in the canon of the story they're actually older. And I find that, especially because like in a lot of these stories, them being a demon or something like that is not really relevant for a large portion of the narrative. I find it to be extra creepy, because then it's like, well, then what is the purpose of this character? Why do they have to be like a little kid? And mostly I just think it's a waste, because I do think that it could be really funny to have this sort of like ageless, extremely arcane individual who's not a human to look like a little kid, because there's lots of things in society about the way that we treat little kids that could be really funny for someone super powerful and super old and wise, but like they never actually do that. It always seems like an excuse to make these child characters act like a sultry like 20-year-old human and not like a demon. I might even expand this to how anime sort of like portrays children in general, because oftentimes they don't really act like kids, which I always notice when I watch like a Studio Ghibli movie, how much they like are able to embody what it feels like to actually be a kid and what kids are actually like. When they put so much like frills and like cutesy stuff on them and make them such like a a weird idealized version of a kid, it's sometimes kind of jarring. Like I would rather see like the like rough and tumble, like, you know, sort of sloppy energy of an actual child in the characters, just because it feels more authentic. But I guess for every story you're going to need different things from your characters, so that's not necessarily a pet peeve, but it is something I notice. Next up is the voluptuous punching bag. Now, I feel really bad for this character, and I have extremely negative feelings towards this trope in general, but basically this is the character who's basically around in a lot of anime to be fan service, and while I don't think there's inherently anything wrong with fan service in anime or anything like that, like it gets really crazy sometimes, and it can be really distracting and make you feel like the story is only there to facilitate the fan service. But what's even worse than that is a lot of the times this character is like extremely nice, extremely naive, and in love with the main character, and she always gets rejected for like the mean tsundere girl, like who's her romantic rival, even though she's done nothing wrong the entire time. Even though the anime still feels free to use her for all kinds of like creepy camera shots, and she's always bouncing all over the place, which frankly with her anatomy and proportions I don't think would be possible without a lot of pain. I know that anime isn't 100% realistic all the time, but it does throw me off every time I see one of these characters with these super dramatic proportions like jumping up and down and not noticing. You know, it just doesn't really track with me. I would love to see an anime where the girl who has these sort of proportions is like complaining about the back pain. I just think it would be, I don't know, it would ground her in a way that's really fun. But generally I just don't like any fan service character who's like sort of treated as like this ditzy joke and then gets dropped in the end. Like there's something so like insult to injury about that. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, oftentimes she's like very, very cute, very nice. She does nothing wrong the whole time, and she gets sometimes even like harassed and abused for laughs throughout the anime, which really bothers me. There's a few examples of that in anime that I watched growing up, and I definitely think that it was a very like cruel trope to be so common in anime that's for like kids and teens. Next up is the strange problem. It's not exactly same-face syndrome, but it's sort of a tertiary problem that could come out from having your characters all be very similar. Now, I personally think that same-face syndrome is actually an even less serious problem as anime than a lot of people would think. A lot of people think it's a huge issue. I think that same body syndrome is actually worse, because while a character can have the same face, if they have dramatically different body types, you'll still be able to tell them apart no matter what they're wearing or how they're styled. But that's a matter for another time. When anime has characters who look almost identical, except for their hair and sometimes their clothes, but sometimes literally just their hair and eye color, it's very distracting when that anime will insist to you that one of these characters who looks identical is extremely attractive and one of them is very average looking. Like, I can't get over it. It's so weird when I'm watching an anime and they're like, oh, she's so beautiful, she looks like a celebrity, and then she'll be like walking next to someone who has her exact same face, like almost down to like a T, and it's so strange to me. This also goes for characters remarking on someone being blonde when the characters have like a full rainbow of hair colors. I mean, it's fine, it's kind of funny, but it's just weird. Like, there was an anime I was watching recently where there's a foreign exchange student from France, I believe, and she's like blonde, and it's very like, whoa, she's blonde. Meanwhile, there's a girl with full-on like split hair with like purple and pink, and there's another girl who's exactly as blonde as her, but she's just like Japanese and nobody mentions how she looks, and it's just like, I'm confused. Like, what is going on? Why does what we see with our eyes, like, why is that so different from what the story is saying about these characters' appearance? Just like, show don't tell. That's always the rule, and with character design that's extra important. You can't have a situation where the narrative has to tell you how a character looks when you're looking right at them. So those were my biggest pet peeves when it comes to anime characters and like tropes in character design for anime. Please let me know if you have any of your own, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Thank you to all of my patrons, including Bella Story, Best Kaiju, Lion, Clockwork Construct, Dark Jelly, Dr. Casket, Ilaria Louie, Emmy Bourgoin, Greer the Animator, Griffix, Hachiubi, Ice Cream Pal, Yvonne Rodriguez, JJJ, Joseph Copel, Lauren, Liblablabla, Liliana Hammond, Marina Costa, Marie, Mr. Dr. Pants, Mia Lavali, Nicole Ludwig, Nicolette Queen, Nora Cornelison, Q Musgrove, Rainwater Pearls, Rebecca, Ruined Rain Crow, Some Mediocre Artist, Steffi, Stephanie Vargas, The Artsy Moose, Tom David Johansson, Trace, and Your Boy ST.